So today we start Unit 7 on intelligence, and in this unit we just really unpack what it means to be intelligent. Being in school your whole life, I'm sure you have people in your class who you've identified as being smart, and then people you've identified as being not smart. But is that really the case? So we're going to first look at theories that psychologists have on what intelligence is, and then we're going to spend the last part of the unit looking at intelligence tests. Can we accurately measure someone's intelligence? And if we can, are there biases to those intelligence tests? Are there ways that you can train for those intelligence tests so that you can actually be perceived as more intelligent than what you really are? And so this unit is pretty interesting just because it deals with the stuff that we've been inundated with in school our entire lives. Much like many of the topics that we've talked about this semester, psychologists cannot agree on what intelligence actually is. But they've got some theories, and you're going to be responsible for knowing 4 of those theories. And they are general intelligence, triarchic theory, multiple intelligences, and emotional intelligence. So we're going to spend the next few days learning about these intelligence theories, and then you're going to decide for yourself which one you think best describes intelligence. One of the oldest theories that we use to describe intelligence is from British psychologist Charles Spearman, and his theory is called the G factor, and G stands for general intelligence. So if you asked him, how do you know if someone is intelligent? He would say if they have a high G, they're intelligent. So what is G? G is your general cognitive ability that you have to solve cognitive tasks. So they could be verbal tasks, math tasks, analytical tasks. And what he found was that if you tended to do well in one of those tasks, like if you scored high in the math section, you'd also score really high in the verbal section. And so his theory about intelligence is that it's just this one cognitive ability that you have that supersedes all these other categories. Because when he tested people, if they did well in one section, they tended to do well on other sections. If they did poorly on one section, really poorly, they tend to do really poorly on other sections. So we said it's this thing that supersedes all the categories that we have. You should have noticed this on the Battle of the Brains videos because this is what a modern day IQ test tests. It tests your cognitive ability on a wide range of different cognitive tasks. And if you tend to do well in one section of the IQ test, you tend to do well on the sections of the other sections of the IQ test. And in opposition to this, Spearman said that there are things that exist called S factors, which are specialized factors. These are things that you learn that aren't innately within you. And so he said those comprise of like mechanical intelligence or social intelligence. So it explains why someone who's really smart or really intelligent can make really dumb decisions with who they hang out with or who they end up marrying. You'd look at some people and you're like, wow, they're so smart, but they're making really dumb life decisions. Well, Charles Spearman would say that's not their G, that's their S. And so he would describe intelligence as being a high G. So how did he prove this? He proved this through a technique called factor analysis. This is a really important term that you want to make sure that you know. And factor analysis is just a statistical model of taking test questions and grouping the test questions that are a lot alike. Today we have computer models that do this for us. Spearman used pen and paper, but it's just essentially where you take a test, like we could take a Spanish test even, and it statistically groups questions that try and measure the same thing together into clumps. And again, when Spearman would give out these tests, he found that if you did well on one cluster of questions, you tended to do well on other clusters of questions. And so this graph here is something that we'll use tomorrow in class to kind of show you more about factor analysis. But again, if you were to ask Spearman what is intelligence, he would say it's one mental ability, it's your G factor. Now, Howard Gardner disagreed with Charles Spearman, and he said that intelligence is not just one ability, but it actually is multiple abilities that one can have. They can be good in one thing and not so good in another, and be intelligent in that one thing. And so he got this from studying savants. And before I show you what a savant is, Gardner actually is still alive today. He was in that Battle of the Brains video you watched. He was the psychologist that was a little bit cross-eyed. So his theory is more modern. But a savant is somebody who has an extraordinary mental ability, like extraordinary memory or extraordinary artistic ability, spatial ability, but they score so low on an IQ test that they need like 24-hour care. They can't tie their own shoes, they can't feed themselves, so they're mentally handicapped, mentally retarded is what we used to call it, but they have this extraordinary mental ability that doesn't fit in with the theory of G. And so Gardner said, we have to come up with this new theory that will fit how these people are. So I want to give you an example of a savant. If you've seen the movie Rain Man, it's a really good movie about a savant, but it involves it's a true story based on a guy named Kim Peek. who has an extraordinary memory and mental ability. He could read incredibly fast, and he's memorized I think he's memorized every zip code in the United States, but he needs 24-hour care. So let's watch a little bit about Kim.
I got all the sticky stuff out. Have that.
He did it.
He did it. He did a good job.
54-year-old savant Kim Peek spends all of his time in his father Fran's company. Kim is celebrated for his remarkable memory, but he needs his father's help with living everyday life.
Just about anything.
It was great to see those folks, all of them.
The Peeks have lived in Salt Lake City, Utah, all of Kim's life. The public library here is Kim's favorite place in the world. Kim devours books on anything and everything, as many as 8 in a day.
He reads a page that you and I would read in 3 minutes. It takes him about 8 to 10 seconds. He reads the left page of the left eye, right page of the right eye, and remembers about 98% of it. He has 15 subject areas. When I explain them to people, I try to say about the only thing he can't do, he can't reason out mathematical problems.
Kim may be weak on conceptual encoding, but he has a distinct advantage when it comes to remembering postal codes. Kim has been interested in zip codes for years. He and Fran have a bit of spare time in their itinerary to indulge that interest. Gary Reblin works for the US Postal Service and is a zip code expert.
Did you know that there are 42,000 5-digit zip codes in the United States?
What was the name of the city that you grew up in?
I grew up in Swampscott, Mass.
019 is East Essex, 018 is West Essex.
And what was the area code there, too?
Your 617 becomes a 781.
Absolutely, they changed the area code. I pulled out a pretty small example in my hometown. It's not a large place, and he rattled it off like that.
018 is West Essex.
He gave me the zip code. He gave me my area code.
617 becomes 781.
He knew not only the area code, but he also knew the fact that that had changed back in the 1980s.
You know that?
Absolutely, they changed the area code.
I know the whole San Francisco area. 3 is Redwood City, 4 is Palo Alto.
It really has to almost be straight memory. We didn't use any formulas, so it's really a remarkable bit of memorization.
7 is Berkeley, 8 is Richmond, 9 is Marin County. You know that?
By the time we enter a zip code that we're looking at, it is about 20 seconds before you get the information back to a customer, where you asked him and you had the answer in about 1.
021, 022, depending upon where you are.
What's that?
What's that?
If only Kim were as predictable as a computer.
Boom!
The US mail could use his talents.
It just barely hit the foul pole.
But he's erratic, and his way of communicating is somewhat unorthodox.
Tony has savant syndrome, a rare condition that combines mental disabilities with islands of genius and superior memory ability.
I can memorize so many songs, 7,000 songs in my repertoire.
Tony plays 13 instruments, composes, and has perfect pitch. Savants have different gifts, but they all have remarkable memories.
So after studying these savants, Howard Gardner said that we don't just have one intelligence like Wes Spearman said. He said we have 9 intelligences, and some even say that he might add some more soon. So what are these 9? He said we can have linguistic intelligence, logical mathematical intelligence, spatial intelligence, musical intelligence, bodily kinesthetic intelligence, intrapersonal intelligence, which is intelligence that is about yourself, and then you can have interpersonal intelligence, which is intelligence with other people and like your ability to interact with others. naturalist intelligence, and existential intelligence. And so his theory is so popular today that there are actual schools that exist in the United States that you can go to or send your future kids to that cater students' learning to their identified intelligence. So if you're identified to have a high linguistic intelligence, when you create your assignments or do your work to show that you've learned something, you're going to present it in a way that magnifies your linguistic intelligence. Or if you have been shown to have high bodily kinesthetic intelligence, then the way that you present your material that you've learned is in a bodily kinesthetic way. So they cater your learning to your matched intelligence style, if you will. But Gardner has some major criticisms when it comes to his theory. The first being that most of his theory is involved with case study research and not any empirical data like factor analysis that Spearman used. Gardner just studied savants, so there's not really a reliable test that exists to prove that multiple intelligences are real. Now, there are tests to see which one of those 9 subjects you might dominate in or be most intelligent in, and we'll take one of those in class. But there's no test that exists to prove that it's a legit intelligence. And I think the biggest criticism of multiple intelligences is, are those 9 things actually intelligences, or are they just abilities or gifts that you have? There's a strong debate in the psychological community that a lot of those things aren't intelligence. You know, if you're good at sports, nobody's going to classify you as being smart if you're bad at school. They're going to say you have a gift or an ability, but they're not going to classify you as intelligent. But then people who are in Gardner's camp will say, absolutely, they're intelligent. And so this is a debate that we'll talk about in class as well. So this is where we're going to stop today. You've learned of Spearman's G theory, and you've also learned of Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences, and we'll cover the rest later.